Welcome to Minority Focus. I'm your host, Jimmie Moore. Back in 2000, Jessica Currin, a young black woman in Mayfield, Kentucky, was murdered in a most horrible way. And the resulting investigation, people who have been accused, in some cases convicted of that murder, there have been so many changes and drastic turns of events with evidence and the actuality of that happening that is absolutely ridiculous. We've done shows where we've talked to the private investigator John Poole, who's been about this matter for a number of years, who has uncovered any number of things that are pertinent to what actually happened in the matter. John is here with us today, and joining him for this segment of Minority Focus is Tamara Caldwell, who was actually convicted of the crime and served prison time for it before being released. One of those people that got involved, that it was learned the trueness of her involvement, and unfortunately others haven't had that luck yet, if you will. Welcome, Tamara. John.
Thank you.
How are you both doing? Thank you very much, Tamara, for coming on the show today. Appreciate it. Appreciate it. How long did you actually serve in prison?
I served 5 years, 8 months, and 5 days.
I think it's always, tell you how monumental having to go through something like that is. The average person that I've heard who's been to prison, who served time, knows the exact number of years, days, and sometimes even hours. How'd you get into all of this? Were you just a name that was picked out? Or?
A name that was picked out.
Out of
I don't understand why I was put in it, really.
Right. And I've come to understand that happened in any number of cases.
Yeah.
People plucked out of, we literally plucked out of thin air. Did you have association with some of the people supposedly involved?
Victoria was my cousin.
Right.
She's my first cousin.
That's Victoria Caldwell.
Victoria Caldwell.
Okay. There may be some other questions that I can't get in mind to ask you. So as I speak with John, if he needs you to make reference to something, he can ask you,
okay.
If you will. What the heck happened there, John? I don't know all the particulars, and won't ever know all the particulars. Nor will you, I doubt seriously. But how did they bring Victoria into? Bring Tamara into to the point of sending her to prison? How did that?
Well, as we talked about in previous shows, originally there were 2 boyfriends of Jessica that was charged with this crime, and the case against them was dismissed because the state didn't turn over the discovery as they supposed to have done within the time frame. So that was dismissed without prejudice. That means that any time they could have brought the case back up. And what happens many times, at least in my experience in law enforcement, if that happens, then you go and put your case back together, and the stuff that you didn't turn over, then you can take that back and the case can come back up again. But what we had here, there were people, by the time that case was dismissed, one person in particular, a lady by the name of Susan Galbraith, started investigating this case, and she was able to get all the discovery that was given to Adams. And in court, when she testified, at first she said she got it from Adams' attorney. Anyway, when you're charged with a crime, you do get that discovery. Right. And in my opinion, and the record will show, that Susan went about writing different scenarios that were different than what had originally happened, and primarily she had been friends with Jeremy Adams' mother, and she did interviews with Jeremy Adams' mother accompanying her, and people, Jeremy Adams, one of his girlfriends. And so she started bringing in these people, and she used to post the different names, including my nephew's name, on MySpace and on the internet as people of interest. And so she put Tamara's name on there, but her name had not been mentioned before Susan started putting that in.
I see. So it sounds like it's a case of I'm in trouble or whatever, or somebody else is in trouble and I'm trying to help them or what have you. And because I don't have anything else, somebody mentions your name to me, and I mention it to someone else, and instantly you're involved in this by mere mention. That's what it seems a lot of this is all about. Hearsay, somebody said you're part of it, whatever. What a mess. A horrendous murder, horrendous. And I don't think there'll ever come a time when we can't express the greatest sympathy and condolences to the Currin family. I cannot imagine what it's like to lose a child. I have 3, and I can't imagine what it's like to have to go through that. Tamara, after being as involved as you were for whatever reason, however, in it, what has it been like for you to come back to the area and have to confront or see some of these people? What's that like?
It's basically like I'm facing the people that they really think I done something to this girl. Right. I mean, now we talk like when I see Jessica's brother Joe or Jill, right. We talk like normal people. Right. I mean, they're not mad or nothing like that. We just talk like normal people.
Right. Well, unlike some people, once said to be guilty, always guilty. Unlike
right.
some people like that, and particularly in the case of the Currins, mm-hmm. who have come to that point where they realize something is amiss. Right. And some other things need to be looked at. Mm-hmm. Once they accept that, then they can move past. And I think that's evident in the last the Minority Focus show, in which Joe Currin, the father, mm-hmm. and David Cross, the father of the convicted and now convict, are in somewhat alignment. They're in alignment that mm-hmm. all is not known, and all that has been accepted as truth is not truth. Mm-hmm. And thanks to the efforts of people like John Poole, some of those things are still being investigated. You're bumping heads, in some cases stepping on toes, and exposing things and people that a lot of people don't know anything about, as is the case of a lot of small towns. X number of people decide everything that goes on. In the day-to-day things that people do, in the legal system, in the justice system, is the basket of that chock full?
That's correct, and you recall from our other discussions that this whole case was based on the testimony of 3 women. And we mentioned before an investigator with the Kentucky Innocence Project had interviewed all 3 of those women, and they've all stated to him, and he's put that in an affidavit which he's sworn to and signed, that they were intimidated by the police authorities to say those stories, right. primarily by, at that time there were KBI agents. They've since disbanded the KBI and created a different group, which they still work. One is Lee Wise and the other's Robert O'Neill. Right. And they were brought in supposedly as the high law enforcement. So there was instant conflict between the state police and the KBI. If you look at, they didn't schedule the interviews. Well, a good example, and the record shows that, like Jeremy Adams, who was one of Jessica's
Right.
alleged boyfriends, that the state police interviewed Adams, and then the KBI interviewed Adams. So they weren't working together, and that's how some of this, just like putting Tamara in or whoever in, that's all just basic hearsay, or somebody said. Nobody validated that these people were involved, and there's no physical evidence to validate that.
Right. As you're talking, I'm thinking about an old Andy Griffith show I saw where the big guys, the state police, whatever, come in to investigate something that happens in Mayberry, and Andy and them become nothing. Is that that typical type thing that you see on TV where people who from higher up come to investigate in a situation where they don't live, don't know, et cetera, but the authority that is there, city police, state police, whatever, get nudged aside, and what they say doesn't matter anymore. The head honchos, the high law is high law. What they do, what they say is taken as reality.
Well, that's what happened in this case, but at the very beginning, it was the Mayfield Police Department, and they assigned a person that had no experience. It was just promoted in the field as a detective. There was evidence that was lost that would have been very useful in finding out who did that. And then after all that, it was turned over to the state police. And the first trooper that was assigned that, Jimmie Mills, was ultimately dismissed from the state police. Right. And I think on Mr. Mills' investigation that if you look at what he did, he worked in close conjunction with Susan Galbert, right, the investigator, and so when you work in law enforcement, you need to be close to people that give you information, but you don't want to get too close and do a joint investigation. And especially Officer Mills had to have known she had all the discovery information from the Adams family, so he should have gotten that back away from her, because right, if her goal was to find that Jeremy Adams didn't do this, how is she working in conjunction with the state police? And then ultimately the KBI was brought in because Mr. Currin asked the Attorney General's office to bring them in because he thought the city police, which is true, and the state police hadn't adequately investigated. That's how the KBI, the top law enforcement agency, got involved.
No evidence, from what I've read, from what you've discovered, no evidence, and from the onset, lies, absolute lies, recanted testimony from those liars, if you will, repeatedly, not once, like bouncing, from A to B, C, then back to A, and then back to B, and whatever. Started in 2000 at the onset and has continued through 2007. Still no truths. They've lied so that the confusion has just permeated the thing, and nobody can get down to the nitty-gritty.
Well, that's why, as we discussed with Mr. Currin, in what we're asking is the federal authorities to investigate this matter. Certainly from what the three ladies have said and others have said, people's civil rights have been violated if those accusations are true. And that comes under the jurisdiction of the FBI. Right. And that will also give us a look to see about the integrity of the law enforcement system if we have the FBI look at it, because there's constant, through this whole case, it's been constant motions made about the KBI and state police forcing people to lie, and this will bring the truth out, hopefully.
Tell me, your fingerprints were there, right? Your DNA was there, right? You smoked a cigarette and threw it on the ground and they got the cigarette butt, right? No evidence, nothing physically linking you to this. Somebody said you.
Somebody said my name.
And then somebody else agreed, and then somebody
Yeah,
else
right.
agreed, and then, but at a certain point in time, they said, "Nah, we was just fibbing. We made it up."
Right.
And she didn't. She didn't really, at the cost of 5 years of your life.
She had nothing to do with it.
None of those people.
Right.
Still see those folk?
No.
No? They avoid you like the plague?
Like the plague.
I would imagine I would too.
Yeah.
I mean, in view of all that's happened, and the fact that none of those things of evidence ever showed didn't save you.
Nope.
On the basis of what somebody said, you spent 5 of your years
5 years, yep.
in prison, behind what I think that, and I'm sure most people think is one of the most horrific murders to ever occur anywhere in this area. And after 13 years, nobody really knows.
Nope.
And it's interesting, too, that one of the people that accused her, Rosie Christ, when she testified at the Quincy Cross trial, she was called by the prosecution first, and she said that these people were involved. Then the defense called her, and she said that she was forced to lie for the prosecution.
Right?
That was never really looked into, how they handled that. They prosecuted her for perjury. Even though a motion had been presented to the court way back in July of 2007, these people were arrested in March of 2007. 2 investigators that worked for Mark Bryant, the attorney, had contacted Rosie Christ at her home, and we have the videotape of that. And she said in July of 2007 that she was forced to lie by the police. And she said she wasn't going to lie in court, but yet she did, because now she claims she was afraid of the police. A motion was made to have a hearing on that in Judge Stark's court. That could have brought up whether there was force or threatening or so forth. The judge decided not to have a hearing on that. So we don't know what would have happened. If somebody had checked the validity of these people that were testifying, they could have had a whole different outcome rather than taking it on the face of what they said.
Tamara, thanks a lot for coming on the show. Appreciate
You're welcome.
it. I wish your continued safety in society, if you will. John's going to come back with us in just a little bit, but first, after we take a short break, I'm going to be talking with 2 other involved parties in the case. David Cross, who's the father, Quincy Cross, who is now incarcerated, has been for almost 8 years, and Joanna Burton, who is the mother of Jeffrey Burton, who is also still incarcerated for the murder with no evidence, no DNA, no spit, no cigarettes, no nothing, that says he deserves to be there. We'll take a short break, and we're going to come back and talk with them in just a few minutes. In the early stages of the horrible murder of Jessica Currin in Mayfield, Kentucky, a number of people accused accused of being involved, guilty, not guilty, whatever. Two of those people were Jeffrey Burton, who had a sentence of 15 years, and Quincy Cross, who was actually convicted of the murder and received a life sentence. David Cross is Quincy Cross's father, and Joanna Wyatt is Jeffrey Burton's mother. Both of their sons are incarcerated in prisons as a result of some of the non-evidence, non-this, non-that, no proof, no all the things necessary or that are supposed to be necessary to convict a person of a crime have been found in this matter. Was Jeffrey initially, Joanna, convicted? When, what year was he convicted of the crime?
It's been 6 years.
Well, it's been 6 years.
6 years and a month, yeah.
From the onset of this, from when this first happened in 2000, when did he actually become part of it?
From what I've read and looked at, in 2000, the very end of 2006, not long before his arrest.
Right.
That's from what I have read in the paperwork, I never seen his name in anything.
So he, like a lot of other people, 5, 6, 7 years later, their name pops up, and all of a sudden they're as deep in it as the people who were involved in the...
Then where we seen his name was, the first time was on MySpace.
Right.
Someone called us and said, your son's name is on MySpace as a person of interest in the murder of Jessica Currin.
Right.
Jeffrey called me and was telling me, and I was like, well, you know, you didn't have anything to do with this, so you have nothing to worry about. Wise and O'Neill come to his house not long after that, asking him if we lived in a house that had a basement in it. We did not.
Right.
And they left. They come back again a couple weeks later, like at 10 o'clock at night. Jeffrey and his wife and 3 kids were there. And Jeffrey, other than knowing Tamara at school, that was about, he didn't know the others at all.
Right.
And when the Wise and O'Neill left his house that night, they told him, it doesn't matter if you done anything wrong or not.
This is Wise and O'Neill, who were the KBI, or the
KBI.
KBSI, or
KBI.
KBI, Kentucky Bureau of Investigations.
They
The
told
two
him.
people sent her to investigate that had no experience whatsoever in investigating a murder case, this being their first, one of them being, for the moment I'll say, closely associated with somebody having to do with the Attorney General's office at the time.
His wife?
Yeah,
Yeah.
people that didn't know what they were about. From the time that he first learned that he was involved in it, I'll say, until the time they actually convicted him and sent him to prison, how long or how much of an investigation did they do? How long did it take?
Well, the first time they come to his house, it was only like maybe a month to 6 weeks when they picked him up at his job.
Right.
And they took him over here at Drury Suites
Mm-hmm.
and kept him there all day, interrogating him. And he never changed his story,
Right.
you know, and then they took him to jail that night.
Right. In the earlier part of the program, Tamara mentioned that when they questioned her, when they came to get her to question her, that they were going to take her to jail or to somewhere official to question her, but instead wound up at the executive end, not the executive end, Drury Suites, where they questioned her. That was the case with Jeremy. They questioned him at the Drury Suites. Kind of odd that turned out to be the interrogation hotel instead of somewhere where everything that was said would be recorded and cameras and all that sort of thing. What is your hope today of getting him out?
I pray to God every day that something will happen that he can come home now.
Right.
I'm to the point now, I just want his name cleared for when he does come home.
For sure.
Because through it all, we kept telling him, you know, it's all going to work out.
Right.
And the day that we were supposed to start the trial, that day we thought we were going to start trial. Out of the blue, Jeffrey takes an Alfred plea.
Right. Right.
His lawyer, Mark Bryant, told him that Tamara was going to tell whatever they wanted him to
Right.
tell.
Right.
And they told, from what I understand, told her also the same thing.
Right. talked. The attorney advises that you take
Yes.
this alpha plea.
Yes.
Someone not knowing any better, or being scared to death, or what have
Yeah.
you.
Jeffrey
do
was
that.
scared to death because all along that whole case has been messed up. So he's scared to death that the same thing's going to happen to him that happened to Quincy.
Right.
Exactly.
He wants to come home.
For sure. 15-year sentence. Oh my gosh. Nothing is taken lightly. No punishment that anyone has received is taken lightly, but Quincy has a life sentence.
Without possibility of parole.
Without the possibility.
Without possibility of parole.
Did he also, did he do that? He didn't do the Alfred plea thing, did he? No. It was just a conviction straight up on the basis of hearsay, da 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 da. No evidence, no fingerprints, no DNA, no blood samples done, nothing taken from.
Well, they had gave DNA samples, but everybody that was arrested, there didn't match. Didn't match no DNA that was around Jessica. As a report we got, there was something like 23 people that was logged that was supposed to have been around Jessica that night, and they only they only DNA tested our people, and it didn't match. So Judge Starks didn't see it was necessary to test the rest of the people that she was supposed to have been around that night. So,
Right. From my understanding of my reading, there were things that perhaps could have been done, that Judge Starks could have done, but
whole lot.
in his position and in whatever authority he had, he needed only to say, I don't want to do that.
well, that's the way it seems. He didn't test anybody else for DNA, just the people that was arrested, and their DNA didn't match. So her sample that was on her shoes probably would have told somebody that was around her, but they decided not to DNA test anybody else.
Right. Just a few of the things that have been uncovered. In addition to no physical evidence, photos taken at the crime scene were couldn't help. Some were lost. The camera stopped functioning. The house, or Jeffrey's father's house, a particular item of interest was demolished, torn down a long time before. Case still hasn't been solved, but before anybody got convicted for it. There's a lot of the information about this case is online and places on the computer. I hope you go online and check out some of these things that were not done. It's just unfathomable that either of you, according to the evidence, or lack of, that your children are incarcerated. Dave, you've been about it almost 8 years now. Quincy's been in prison almost.
Well, that's 6 years, 7. Yeah.
6 or 7.
Same. They went to prison at the same time.
Is that right? They were initially just about
Right.
at the same time. Separately, tried separately.
Well,
Yes.
well, they wasn't tried. Quincy was tried.
Right. Jeffrey, initially, who went first? Did Jeffrey go to prison
Quincy.
first?
Quincy.
Quincy
went
had
to
a
prison
mock trial down in Clinton.
In Clinton, Hickman County. He's convicted and gets sentenced, and then later on they decide to convict Jeffrey too for the same crime.
Yes.
So they're both. This is one of the most confusing things I've ever heard or read on television. I don't know any of the particulars.
Well,
But just from what I've read,
we was
it's
confused too.
I would
Because
imagine.
people that got arrested didn't even know each other. So how can you do a crime when you don't even know each other?
All right.
But we can't get nobody to hear that. We can't get no justice. Just like Mr. Currin, he can't get no justice.
Right. Bunch of good old boys decide to get together and have a party at the club, and wine, liquor, a few dancing girls, what have you. Something happens, something criminal with somebody there, perhaps none of them, and as a result, some of these things are happening. I've sort of caught wind of something along those lines. We're talking about this country club thing, Dave.
Well, well, I don't know nothing about. All I know about is our people didn't even know each other. Our people didn't have no idea of this murder,
Right.
because well, Quincy, he met Tamara in 2002 down at the RC Center when she came down to visit somebody. So, I mean, you know, how
Aside from that, they didn't even know each other.
No, and right now the only time he's ever seen Jeff Burton was
In court.
in court. He
Is that right?
never met Jeff Burton.
Oh, time out.
Yeah.
Well, weren't they supposed to have been together
That's what we're saying. They
at
was,
this
they was all
crime
supposed-
scene? Weren't they both
Yeah.
supposed to have been part of this?
Yes.
Yeah, they were supposed to be
But
together.
they never met? They
Jeffrey never met Quincy.
until the court. Is that a known fact? Is that known?
Yeah.
Do legal people
Yes.
know
They-
this?
Yeah, they knew.
Our
What they do
lawyer,
with
Mark
it? Once they
Brotman.
found that out, what they do with it?
Huh?
Did nothing with it.
No.
Yeah. Well, thanks very much for telling me.
No.
I mean, Jeffrey didn't know Victoria, Venetia. He knew Tamara from passing her, and you know, they went to school together.
Right.
He didn't really even know Jessica. He had heard her name, you know, because they all from Mayfield. But as far as knowing her, he did not know her.
On the night, in the room, supposedly, where all of these beautiful, not all of these beautiful people, all of these people are directly involved on the spot with the awful murder of a beautiful young girl, young woman, and they don't know each other. They've never met
No.
each other. No connection can be established.
No.
Or they might have known each
Quincy
other.
met Tamara in 2002.
Right.
Yeah. And like we said, he never met Jeff Burton other than seeing him in court.
Right. I read some things that say none of them knew Jessica.
No.
But they had never met
No,
Jessica.
Quincy never met Jessica.
All of this in a small town, small as Mayfield is, and the results of what happened put in effect, and it's rule and law, people go to prison, da 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 da. It doesn't usually work that way if people who have no legal knowledge in any form or fashion, who have no position in various agencies that are responsible for getting murders investigated and solved, and et cetera, they're not there. Only the people involved are people who are in those, and all of them from Mayfield. And all of them, I'd almost want to say there's some kind of conspiracy to,
Well, that's the way it looks.
if all the I'll say
looks-
governing people
It
in
looks like
Mayfield.
that nobody wants to really find out who the real killers are.
Why? Why would you say that?
I have no
Why would you
idea.
say that?
No,
There's got to be a reasoning behind that, other than just what's out there now.
because our people are in prison for nothing,
Yeah.
you know.
Why would you? Is that all you'd have to think of? Is that all you'd think? Simply, well, must be something wrong going on. Would you be satisfied? You can't be satisfied with that. Something is the matter. Period. Oh well, you know, maybe somebody will find out one of these days.
Well, we filed a 1142, which has been denied. We filed another brief.
1142. What's?
That's rights of prisoners to file.
I'm sorry,
on this
Dave. I meant to
case.
ask you about that. What has happened with this appeal process?
Well, I'm telling you, we filed 1142, and they responded to it, which they denied it, and we filed another brief to the Kentucky Court of Appeals, and they filed their brief, but we haven't got no hearing. We haven't got no final decision on it yet.
It's unconscionable to think that this is over. It's not over until, and I know that neither of you will ever be at peace until your children are vindicated and at home. But from what I understand about the case, it seems almost insurmountable. If you're talking about people who go up in the high echelons of government and law enforcement, and how difficult it's going to be to get through some of the barriers that you're going to have to go through. I said earlier on, God bless both of you. I cannot begin to imagine my child being in prison for X number of years, for any period of time for that matter, but to look at a 15-year sentence and a life sentence without the possibility of parole, I can't fathom, and I wish you the best. I wish you well with your efforts and with the efforts of some of the other people that are involved. Here's hoping that one day, like my dear old mom said, what's done in the dark will come to the light sooner or later. Thank you very much for coming. We'll be back in just a few minutes. Welcome back. A lot of times in a criminal situation and that one might be involved in which they believe that they're innocent or they didn't do whatever, a lawyer would tell you, if you don't, just go ahead and plead guilty to this and they'll give you a week. But if you don't, and you go before a jury, and that, you know how juries are now, you never know what they're going to do. And a jury decides that you're guilty for the matter, then you probably get about 20 years. The average person would take that plea, would take that plea bargain. This is what happened, I understand, to you, Tamara, when you went before. What happened? What'd you do?
We was getting ready to go to trial in Hickman, and my lawyer came, James Gibson, my lawyer, came in there and told me that Jeffrey Burton's lawyer told him that if I testified against him, that he just said that Jeffrey was gonna lie on me. So if I took the alpha plea, that that was it. That's the best. They believed that was the best thing for us to do, was to take the alpha plea. Mm-hmm. So we could, I guess, I don't know, get less of time or whatever.
They played you.
Yeah, they played both of us.
He's like in there fessing up on you, and she's in there fessing up on him.
Yep, that's what both of our lawyers said. They said, if you, Jeffrey said that he was gonna lie on you, and then Jeffrey's lawyer told him that I was gonna lie on him.
Right.
So they played both of us, like dummies.
John, explain the Alfred plea.
The Alfred plea, unfortunately, is probably not explained to defendants as well as it should be, because an Alfred plea in the end is worse than getting convicted by a jury, in my opinion, because you give up all your rights to appeal, you give up everything. Now, they let that little caveat come in that you're not admitting guilt, but they could have enough evidence to convict you if you went to trial. But you're really giving up all your rights in taking that plea.
Okay, in Tamara's case, they could have enough evidence to convict you. What would that evidence have been that they could have had against her to convict her?
Well, in this case, what she's saying that she was told that Jeffrey Burton was going to testify against her. But as we've discussed, the only real evidence that we had in this case that can't be proven that it's not valid, and their whole case was based on these three women who have since recanted. So that was their case. If I could just go on a little bit more on that, I think what happened there, I don't believe that the state wanted another trial, because if you looked at the things that went on at the Cross trial, it showed a lot of deficiencies in the state's case. Right. For instance, like Quincy Cross was accused of threatening people in a legal process.
Right.
And when the jailer testified that Cross was in jail, when these women said that he threatened them, they just quietly dismissed those
Well,
charges.
from what I've read, these 3 women said that after all this, that Quincy called a meeting in which he threatened all of them. They better not talk, etc., etc. Later on, this is established that, as a lie, because he was in prison at the time this meeting was in jail at the time this meeting was supposed to have been taken advantage of. Okay, determined to be a lie. These 3 witnesses that you mention often recanted their statements. Is a recantation worthless? What?
Well, it's very hard, and we've said that over and over in the justice system, to turn things around. Once a decision is made, you can see time and time again that it's very hard to bring that back around.
You say very hard. For example, I say you did something and you're convicted on the basis of what I say. And then later on I say, I lied, I made it up, and you didn't really do that. You're in jail with a 50-year sentence for this. You're not going to get out in a year, 2, 3, 4, 5. Because I've gone to the authorities and I said, I lied on this guy. He didn't do that. Doesn't matter. You're still going to have to do time.
Well, like the Cross case, he was convicted by a jury, so he has certain appeals, which his father was talking about and going through that. Where he's hampered is he's having to do that pretty much on his own.
Didn't take a plea.
He didn't take a plea, and in fact, he could have got a better deal, the record shows, if he had testified against them. He chose not to testify against anyone else. He also, if you look at the first 2 that were accused of this crime, Carlos Saxton and Jeremy Adams, even though this isn't admissible in court, both of them showed deception on the polygraph test.
Right.
Mr. Cross was never allowed, even though the record shows he wanted to take a polygraph test. I don't think Ms. Caldwell was ever offered a polygraph test. And Victoria Caldwell, when she was in California, in the Santa Maria Police Department, administered a polygraph test to her, showed deception in the story.
Victoria Caldwell. Victoria Caldwell.
Victoria Caldwell.
Witness protection?
Well, there's really an interesting thing. If you look at the testimony that Sam Steger gave to get these people indicted, he indicated that Susan Galbert found Victoria in California, and the testimony was that it was about January of 2007. But we were able, under the open records law, to get Sam Steger's phone records. And starting in the spring of 2006, he had made over 50 calls to Victoria Caldwell.
Well, this is what I was getting about the witness protection thing. Why is she there in the first place? Okay,
well, that's a good question, because under Steger's testimony, that she wasn't even found till January of 2007. But we do know also in their records, Steger was in the process of getting her in protective custody in the fall of 2006.
They say, in the first place, they don't want to acknowledge this. They want to pretend that they weren't as involved with her. She implicated you,
Yes.
your cousin, implicated you in this matter. They want to say that they don't know this girl really, Then when they finally do acknowledge it, they say, we haven't done anything for her. You bought a hamburger once. But you've got things that say a lot of money was spent on this key witness.
Well, in fact, Lee Wise's testimony in court, I believe it's Lee Wise or O'Neill, that they might have bought her a hamburger or something. But the state police, the record is in there that they're asking the Attorney General to pay for her protective custody. And that's another thing we talked about. Why would Victoria do this? As far as I know, Victoria wasn't working. The best thing she ever did was to get in the witness protection program.
What kind of money are we talking
about? And I have here just a couple of months, just like supposedly she had to be protected from someone, but they put her up in a Cincinnati, Ohio hotel, and just in a couple of days she ran up a $900 phone bill. And if you're in protected custody, at least what I've been involved with that, you don't even allow them to use the phone in there. So they bought, the state bought, like she has $500 in expense money. She bought stuff at Radio Shack, a camera. We estimate just through these that they paid her at least, the time this went to the cross trial, she at least got $40,000 in money.
Excuse me, John. Is this one of the people that recanted testimony against both you and Quincy?
To the Innocence Project, she recanted and said she was forced to make up this story and lie, and the diary which they used, which isn't really any evidence, because the diary, she says now, that she wrote that in the back of a police car with the KBI agents going down the road.
Forced by
Lee Wise and Robert O'Neill.
Okay, that name comes often, Lee Wise. It's my understanding that he is somehow attached to someone who is up in the criminal justice system. Who is that?
Lee Wise's wife is the general counsel for the Criminal Justice Cabinet in Kentucky. And in the Criminal Justice Cabinet, you have the Department of Corrections, the State Police, the Public Advocates Program, and the Kentucky Innocence Project. So right there, the Kentucky Innocence Project was making so much progress, and the affidavit shows, but all of a sudden the funding ran out. And we always wondered why. And then when I've tried to contact the Innocence Project manager, she won't even return my calls. And so, they let me go up and look at all their records. There's cases of it. There was plenty that they could have went ahead and moved on this case. Somehow they made a choice not to do that.
The KBI, I understand, is disbanded or no more. Doesn't exist anymore. It's been moved into something else. Am I right?
Well, there was a press release when Conway, the current Attorney General, got in, said that they didn't work well with the state police or something to that effect. So he created a criminal investigation division. These same people are still in there, Wise and O'Neill.
But it's not called
It's not
the
the KBI, and they don't seem to have the autonomy that they did under Greg Stumbo. Greg Stumbo created the KBI to start with.
Again, I'm cutting you off, but we're down to about 10 minutes here. I want to try to get as much about this in as I can. So quickly, Stumbo, Greg Stumbo. This is the person who awarded Susan Galbraith, who was supposed to have been credited with solving the case. He awarded her some award before the case was solved or before anybody got convicted and sent to prison, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Just when the people were arrested.
That person is now who, what?
He's now the Speaker of the House of Representatives here in
In the
Kentucky.
state of Kentucky. You've got a ratchet there. I remember in what I've read, initially Quincy was supposed to have hit Jessica with a wooden bat. A wooden bat, a gun, whatever. And these are these three people that recanted statements. They said then a ratchet was found, so that he never found the bat, so they decided we'll go with the ratchet instead. And one of the witnesses says the ratchet goes click, click, click. When I first talked to you about this, I remembered from what little experience I've had with using tools and what have you, that it's very difficult for a ratchet to go click, 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 unless it's on a socket being turned to fix something.
That's correct, and that's a very interesting point that you brought up. It was the weapon. Primarily was always the bat, and the state police dug up Rosie Christ, one of the people that's recanted's property, which she has told us was kind of an old dumping grounds out there for construction material. And so a couple of days, a ratchet similar to this, only bigger, was left outside. They didn't even take it in because they couldn't find a bat.
Right.
But then they decided, the state police and the KBI, that the weapon would be the ratchet. And then all of a sudden, Victoria's testifying or giving statements to the state police that the murder weapon was a ratchet.
Right. I want to clear this quickly. Jeffrey Burton is your nephew.
Yes.
But it should be pointed out that your efforts in this matter are not just for him. They are for all people who have been mistreated, misguided, misdirected, falsely accused, falsely incarcerated. Your efforts are across the board. But that Jeffrey is your nephew, and of course, he is inclusive in what you've been doing. Because from what I understand in conversation with you and from what I've read, it's not all about your nephew. It's about so many other things and so many people that are involved in this.
Well, first of all, and I've got to know the Currin family rather well over the years, and they gave me a notebook that had all these things that they have fought to get justice on this. And if anybody that's got the raw end of the criminal justice system, it's been them. And secondly, if I've said before, I worked in law enforcement for over 30 years, and most people in law enforcement are honest, good people. But I believe in this one, they were so bent to get somebody convicted, and they had this person developing the story. They would go out and intimidate people, a lot of them that were on food stamps or other things that they could really work. They would turn the recorder off and on when the story didn't work out.
Is this all at the behest of local authorities, the people who initially muffed, perhaps I shouldn't say muffed, this is not at their behest, KBI is not at their behest to do all of this. Is the focus not on the beginning Mayfield authorities, Mayfield police, Mayfield judges, Mayfield, is it not there? Is that not the beginning?
Well, that's the beginning, and if you look at the record, the state police certainly didn't want the KBI involved because they were duplicating things and so forth. In fact, one of the interviews with Jeremy Adams, Lieutenant Brent White, is on the record saying that the KBI is nothing more than a political dog and pony show. So there was, and that makes it hard. If you're doing an investigation, there has to be a lead agency, you have to coordinate. This was a rush to get something done. In Greg Stumbo, as the Attorney General, would have the power to move anything, and I believe that's what happened in this case.
It's like in so many cases, 9/11 and some of the other atrocious things that have gone on around the country, where the FBI, the CIA, these people don't coordinate. We got this info. It's like a police officer that makes that goes in on an arrest for something, and the actual arresting officer doesn't want him there because, hey, this is my collar.
Yeah.
You know, I'm the head honcho, and I'm the smart one who has done this, or whatever. This seems to have to come out in law enforcement, large law enforcement agencies, let alone the Paducah City Police Department, the Kentucky State Police, KBI.
And to show you how that was the motivation for this, because we've said it over and over, the crime scene doesn't change. Right. And the whole state's case was based on these 3 people that recanted. But if you look at how they claim that happened, and you know anything about forensics or just common sense, they claim that her body was in that garage in the hot late July heat. My garage, if you don't cool it down, will get 120 degrees. Right. And I've unfortunately had to deal with a lot of dead bodies in my career. That body would have been so deteriorated if those people had tried to pick it up, then there would be evidence of that.
Right.
There was one of the heaviest rainfalls in that weekend, and they claimed they drove a car up there. And where's the tire track?
Right.
Both the girls claim that she was nude. Right. She has clothes. I mean, it's just one thing after the other that's wrong.
Just
with
a few
the
things.
states.
Body covered with a sheet. No sheet ever found. In the schoolyard from the east, from the west. No evidence of sheets or blankets. No tire tracks from after a heavy rain if someone was to have driven the body there to be disposed of. Person keys never found. Palm print on the back of the school door, not checked out. Knife wounds, not determined to be there until far after the fact, years if you will. Clump of hair at crime scene missing. Clothing missing. One of the key methods for determining when a person died is maggot activity on the body. Afterwards, maggots not kept as evidence. Decomposition so strong permeated several inches of soil. to the point that the backhoe needed to be removed, but no time frame as to how long
And
the
there's
body
no
was there.
way that if you look at forensic science that you could get that much penetration in that soil. And besides that, if they had went over and picked up that body, then there would be slippage of the skin and so forth.
Right. Again, to lose a child, period. But then under those particular circumstances, I think perhaps in the first show that we talked, Jana, I shied away from mentioning often during that show the particulars about how Jessica was found and what happened and to all of that. Perhaps not fully understanding where her family had come to in this matter. Not accepting, but living with something as we have to learn to do. And I didn't make a lot of comment about her. But one of the saddest things, of course, is her losing her life
Yes.
in such a horrible manner. There remains a son. She had a son that has to live and one day hear, understand about all of this, and that's particularly sad too.
Yes.
Thank you, love, for coming. I wish you the best. I hope that things work well for you in the community that you have to live in.
They will.
And good. That's a great, super positive attitude. John, you know I appreciate
Thank you,
your
Jimmy.
coming on the show. I don't know David Cross and Jeffrey's mother, Joanna, that was here. I appreciate all of you coming. I don't know that this will be the last show that we'll do on this. I don't know that. I'm hoping that at some time in the very near future we can come back and perhaps bring about some more unknowns about it. I wish the best for the parents of the kids who are incarcerated and for the truth to be told, ever how long it takes. I hope soon. I hope soon in the very near future. But that the people who are about finding the truth don't give up. Horrible, horrible circumstance and horrible aftermath that no one knows for sure is going to be brought to the light. We hope so. Thanks again for all the guests that are on this show. If you're out there, if there's anywhere that you can look to read about this, read about it, put some leave or some exception or something down on the table beside you. You're going to need it. It's headache material, mind-boggling. Thanks again for joining me on Minority Focus. I appreciate it. I really appreciate it. For Minority Focus, I'm Jimmie Moore.